Welcome back to the channel. It's lovely to have you here. Last week, we looked at the Hario Switch immersion method. This week, we've opted for looking at a hybrid version of the brew rather than the percolation method as we suggested last week we would, simply because a percolation method of the Hario Switch is really just a V60 and we have some plans to make some nice videos in the future with that. This week, we're going to look at our own version of Tetsu Kasuya's hybrid 4-6 switch recipe. We've decided to brew with this style recipe today because it's relatively simple to make, whether you're at home or you're in the cafe. It also allows us to play and dive into the world of Hario Switch, which allows us to get quite funky and experimental with the recipe. So this is a kind of hybrid between immersion and percolation, as you'll see. So with this recipe, the first 40% of the pour, we're going to be focusing on bringing out sweetness and acidity. And the last part of the pour, the last 60% of the pour, will be the immersion method, finishing off at a pull down at about 3 minutes, bringing us a nice big juicy body. Today, we're going to brew a little bit stronger with a brew ratio of 1:15. This allows us, because the grinder that we use here, she has quite a large particle distribution. The better your grinder, the more uniform your grind size particles are going to be. And what that means is you can extract a little bit more flavor. So you could pull your coffee to about 1:17 or even 1:18 if your grind is offering a more uniform size. The higher quality your hand grinder, the more you can extract from your coffee. Today, our brew ratio is relatively strong just because the grinder that we use here in store will be similar to your entry-level home grinder. An entry-level home grinder will usually have quite a large particle distribution. Because of this, we're also going to grind quite coarse. In general, the coarser that you go on your grinder, the more uniform your particle size will be. We're going to be using the same coffee as last week, the El Salvador Lemus Bella Vista. Let's go! Alright, OCD. For goodness sake. Estás brincar. Oh!
What did you
Okay.
say again?
25. All right, I'm going to set up my kettle now to about 95 degrees. Okay, so first things first, we're going to prepare the Hario Switch. As I mentioned last week, it's made of glass, so we have to preheat everything, get it all nice and warm. Fold your filter. Pop her in the brewer. Going to close the switch so that it's just, it warms up easier, much faster. So our 1:15 ratio, what does that mean? So for every 1 gram of coffee, we're adding 15 grams of water. So basically, the higher the second number, the more diluted your brew is. And as I was talking before about the ability for higher quality grinders to extract more, with the lower quality of grinders, you'll find that there's a lot more fine particles, and these fine particles can leave really bitter flavor in the coffee. Our kettle is 95 degrees. We're just going to rinse this paper and get our brewer nice and hot. So again, this recipe is kind of like, it's a hybrid between infusion and percolation. We're going to start off, so I'll give this a second to heat up. We're going to start off by brewing the coffee as if it was a percolation. So we'll do 2 pours of 60 grams and letting that water run all the way through. At 1:15, we're going to close the switch and let the brew finish off with an immersion style method, hence the hybrid. It's a fusion. Okay, so now our brewer is nice and hot, our filter is rinsed, our decanter is hot. We're going to tear off the scale, pour this 20 grams of coffee inside. We want a final recipe weight of 300 grams. So 20 grams exactly. First things first, open the switch. We'll level it off as you would for a standard V60. So the distribution or the tapping allows us to level the coffee inside, which will help us prevent channeling or minimize the passing of water through weaker parts of the coffee bed. Okay, 95 degrees, boom, tear that bad boy. All right, so as I said, the first 2 pours, 60 grams of water. And then we're going to close the switch, 1 minute 15. All right, I'll show you. Start the timer. Switch is open. 60 grams of water for the first pour. Give her a little stir, just to make sure as much of the coffee is wet as possible. And at 30 seconds, we'll pour the second part. We're going to fill this up until 120 grams. Cool. And at 1 minute 15, we'll close the switch, pour in the rest of the water up to 300 grams. 1 minute 45, we open the switch, let it drain out. Again, we're aiming for a total brew time of 3 minutes. So again, one of the special things about the Hario Switch is this ability to get really funky. Like, you can explore as much as you want with this. You can play with infusion in the beginning. We're at 115. Now, total brew recipe of 300 mils. I'm pouring relatively quickly because I want to reach the full immersion part of this recipe as fast as possible so that it can just steep for the remaining 15 or so seconds. Pouring in circles, circling in, circling out. There we go. 300 grams. Cool. 1 minute 45. Open the switch. And then we wait. The comparison between this brewer and a V60, it really allows us to get experimental with what it is that we want from the coffee. Really fun way to brew. After this, we're going to do a comparison between an immersion method and this kind of hybrid, what we've just done. So the drawdown here is actually a little bit quick. We're currently at 2 minutes 30 and it's basically pulled all the way through. So yeah, this will be interesting to taste. We're aiming for about 3 minutes. We ground here at like a medium, maybe it's a little bit too coarse what we've done. So if I would brew this again, I would have a play with just going a little bit finer on your grind setting. Cool, that's 2 minutes 45. Lovely. Yeah, still definitely the summer fruits type brew. Anyone who has these curtain bangs, like, you know, this pain, this is terrible. Terrible idea. I don't know if you guys have any like coffee nerd friends, or actually you're probably this guy if you're watching this. You know, the gurgling and the sounds while you're drinking coffee. I mean, if you don't do it yet, you should start. Everyone's going to think you're strange. Look what we're doing, right? Just kidding, coffee's a fantastic thing. The aeration of the coffee helps a lot with the flavor. We're trying to spray that coffee up into the olfactory bulbs. This is like retronasal olfaction. When you have the liquid in your mouth and you breathe out, it really opens up, brings up, like it allows the aromas to shine through. It's like some geeky term for you. So like when drinking coffee, I'm thinking, how does it feel on my tongue? How does it feel? What are the aromas like? Does it remind me of anything? How balanced is it? And also as the temperature drops, the flavors will change too. Yeah, I don't mind it. I mean, I think with another 30 seconds, just a slightly finer grind, I think it'll balance it out. There's a little bit too much acidity in there, like slightly sour, I would say, for my liking. Which does make sense as the coffee drew down a little bit too fast. So now what I would like to do is brew our last week's immersion recipe and taste these two side by side. We need to do this relatively quickly, otherwise this coffee will cool down a little bit too much. Let's go. Coffee, filter, water boiling. I think last week we did 18 grams, so we did a slightly different recipe. Just for the sake of the taste test, I'm gonna brew with the exact same ratio. So 1 to 15, 20 grams to 300 grams of liquid. Yeah, so the only difference here is gonna be the immersion method. Immersion method versus slightly funky. Okay, we're at 95 degrees, let's go. Again, first things first, prime your brewer. Want to get it nice and hot. Otherwise, we'll suck the heat away from the brewing coffee. We don't want that. All right, tear that off. Coffee inside, 20 grams. Tear it off again, make her nice and flat. Make sure your switch is closed. This is also one of the problems with these guys. Like, if you forget, you can be brewing with it open and wondering why it's not filling up. I'm not speaking from experience. Okay, start the timer. And we're gonna pour just immediately to the full recipe. 300 grams of liquid, of water. All right, at 45 seconds, I'll give her a stir just to kind of break that crust. And then we'll leave her brewing for 3 minutes. 2 minutes 55, flick the switch. Like last week, and like all the brewing that we do here, feel free to experiment with your grind size, with your brew ratio, with the temperature of your water. Remember to use a soft, high quality water if you can. And also, of course, to your own personal taste. Full drawdown at about 3 minutes 40. Now I hope this hasn't cooled down too much. Of course, as I said before, the temperature drop with the coffee will also have a huge impact on how it tastes. Try and let this cool down a little bit. Yeah, so this is already, she's a bit brighter. Okay. Yeah, much fuller with the body. So again, the same brew ratios, just slightly different methods. This one I can already tell she's fuller in the body than the other. Bigger body, the acidity is muted a little bit. Yep, this we have a lot more acidity happening. I mean, of course, as we said with the, yeah, well, it's not exactly a fair test, is it? Because the drawdown time was a little bit different, unfortunately. And of course, the contact time was different. So it's not a perfect test by any means. But in general, what I'm getting here is the hybrid method has a bit more acidity. There's a little bit more brightness in the cup. I think this is also partly to do with the extraction. And it's also what you would expect from a percolation style brew anyway. Usually, an immersion brew has a bit of a bigger body. It's a little bit rounded. I think both lovely. They've both got potential. Have a play with these at home with the recipes and see if you have your own personal favorite. I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Thanks for coming with us on this little adventure. I like both methods. I think they both serve a different purpose. Have a play with what you think. Let us know what you find and if you have a preference between the two types of brewing with the Switch. Overall, I'm a massive fan of the Hario Switch. I really love the simplicity of immersion style brews just because it makes delicious coffee at home so much more accessible. You don't need to have, like with percolation brews, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with the pouring, how fast or how slow you pour, how high you pour in order to agitate the coffee bed too much. In order for a good consistent brew, percolation method can be quite difficult in the beginning, and the Hario Switch, with the ability to brew purely immersion, purely percolation, or a hybrid of the two, it's just all around, it's a fantastic device. So if you feel like getting experimental at home, if you feel like a classic, beautiful V60, or if you feel like an immersion style method that's relatively foolproof, fantastic. I highly recommend it. Just remember to make it hot beforehand, clean your filter, make the brewer hot, and yeah, have a play, find what you like. Thanks for joining us.